Thank you, Dr. Trupin.
Great.
I think we're good to start. Oh, there's Kevin. Great. Fabulous. Hey, good to see everybody. Welcome. Let's get this show on the road here. It's exciting to see everybody, and we have our two guests. We can now see our two great guests, and we get going. A couple announcements before we start. We're taping, so I'm assuming that's okay with you. So if you're on screen, you might be shown, and when we send this out via email to the 500 people on our David and my email list and Eric's email list. So I'm assuming that's okay. If you could turn off your microphone now, though, just so that all of us have, unless you're Dmytro or Kevin, so that we don't pick up background noise, that would be fabulous. The agenda here is I'll introduce the guests. David will lead the interview for about 35 minutes, and then we'll open it up to question and answer. A couple ways to ask questions. You can physically raise your hand and I'll spot you and I'll make a note and put you on the list, or you can virtually raise your hand with the little raise hand bar at the bottom, or you can just send me a chat if that's what you prefer. Say, Brian, I have a question. And so I'll make a little list of people who want to ask questions, and then I'll just call on you. So wait for me to call on you to pop your question. So don't be shy. Dmytro and Kevin are very friendly and nice. So, so let's get started. Former Congressman David Bonior and I, and Dr. Trupin, Eric Trupin, who's here with us, and a couple, Father Peter Daly. I don't know if he's with us today. And Bob Wood traveled for about 10 days in Ukraine and talked to a lot of great people. And two of the fabulous people we talked to were Kevin Leach and Dmytro, who goes by Dmytro Mazurenko, who goes by Dima. So Dima, we'll call you Dima. And let me just introduce them real quick. Kevin Leach is the founder director of Sabre Training Advisory Group, a Canadian-Ukrainian not-for-profit, which brings NATO veterans to train Ukrainian forces where they are needed most. Kevin is a 10-year veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces and served as an OSCE ceasefire observer in Ukraine from 2018 until the full-scale invasion in February 2022. Dmytro Mazurenko is the founder and COO of Advanced Defense, a drone training school for the Ukrainian military. Dima is also the founder of Tangibly Tech, an IT and software company based in Kyiv. When the war started, Dmytro put his tech skills to use, helping train the Ukrainian military in drone use and adaptation. His company has trained over 300 plus soldiers at his facilities outside of Kyiv. If you've been reading the news, there's been a lot of talk about drone warfare. And we were lucky enough to visit, Kevin took us to a base in Ukraine, and we got to see the drone school that Dima has. So with that, I'm going to pass it to our lead interviewer, Congressman Bonior, to toss a few questions to these guys so we can learn more about the war in Ukraine right now. Or I should say the Russian war against Ukraine is probably the more accurate way to say this.
Thank you very much, Brian. And let me thank all of you for joining. First of all, I appreciate it. Your time is precious, and you've been on our mailing list, and you've received some links and some film as well as some emails from us. So you probably are here because of your interest in that regard. And we appreciate you being here today. Let me just also thank Dima and Kevin for their concern, their patriotism to their countries, Canada and Ukraine, and also for their efforts on behalf of the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian people. It really means a lot to us on what you are doing. And I think when you hear Dima on the drone piece and Kevin in terms of training military personnel and junior officers in Ukraine, you're going to understand how important their work is. So as Brian said, we were on this trip, the five of us, six with Emily Rutkowski, who is in Kyiv right now, to look at basically the mental health situation in Ukraine. And that, from our perspective, we wanted to look at children, combatants, and that's where this piece comes in, and families, and to kind of get us a better sense of how deep the problem was and what some of the solutions were. So we had Eric Trupin, who is on with us here right now. Dr. Trupin is a psychiatrist, and something that he's worked on the Hill as well, and he knows mental health very well and trauma. So he was on the trip and was a great asset to us. Last year, a year ago, Father Daly and I went to Ukraine, and the issue then for us, as we saw it, was refugees and the caregivers who provided for the 8 million Ukrainians who went into Poland. So we spent a week in Poland talking to refugee assistance people and caregivers, and we did the same thing when we went the second week into Ukraine. But this year, the mission was a little different. But we feel that the combatant piece is really important to understand. And so anyway, that's kind of the construct here. What we do is when we go there, we're taking notes and we're learning and we're bearing witness to the struggles that people are having. And then we're taking it back and we're writing about it. I've written a couple of pieces already that have been published, and Father Daly's got one ready to go. And so we're getting the message out as best we can to people about what is happening in Ukraine and why it's important to be supportive of them. And when we got back, we were just very pleased, though, obviously, that the aid package finally got done after over 5 months of delay. So to better understand the soldier in the field and on the front, we met with military personnel, and you've heard it just mentioned that we were with Kevin in the training piece and watched them for about a half a day out there training in arms fire and maneuvers and other things. And then also, we also met with 2 Ukrainian military people from their academy, their army academy, which is similar to West Point, not as grandiose, but that's those folks came and they talked with us as well, and we learned a little bit there. And then, of course, as I said, with the training that came from Sabra and Kevin's work. So anyway, I think it's going to be fascinating. I'm going to not talk very much. You wouldn't know that from my start here, but I'm going to let them really talk, and then maybe we can all get engaged in it in the second half. So let's begin. I want to thank them, and again, for coming, and I want to ask each of them, Dima, maybe you first, and then Kevin, if you can give us your overview of the state of the war today and how you see it and how it's being played out, and any significant points that might relate to that. So why don't we start with our Ukrainian friend today, Dima.
Thank you so much for inviting me to your meeting. It is very great. Glad to see every one of you. And Kevin, nice to meet you. So guys, as far as I got, the question to me was to tell what do I see from my point of view with a world perspective. You mean, if I got you correctly, so actually I see that now we have a very hard state of our current resistance against Russia, because from from my point of view and from point of view of the guys with whom I interact, and while I'm based here in Ukraine, I see that from one side, the world is pretty tired of what is going on right now at the moment. And actually modern world is not ready to take more active part in war, and because there are already a few generations of the people who thought that such kind of huge wars will be in the past and will not appear again. And for the most of highly developed countries, is now the big matter of the choice if they are willing to move away from the comfort zone, if we can call it this way, and to play more active part in our war against Russia. and that, as far as I see, is the biggest challenge. And also, the same situation somehow is happened with the civilian population here in Ukraine, because there are many people who are also get tired of the war, even not participating in the war itself. And we see it with decreasing the amount of donations, and also decreasing the amount of the people who willing to join army actively and fight against Russia. So I see that there are like the biggest challenge that we need to figure out how to overcome in order for us to survive and to hit the Russia back, because unfortunately, for my point of view, not so many people understand that it is a real survival war. And if Russia wins, there will going to be very bad consequences to a civilized world. Of course, to us, the Ukrainians who are here in Ukraine, because we could be physically be killed, of course. So that's why I think that it is now very important time to understand where we are and what this war is actually is. Thank you so much. Sorry if some moments were not very clear. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, that's very clear, very clear. So let me follow up a question, then I'll turn to Kevin, okay? So
Sure.
what piece of the war, I had a sense what you were saying, Dima, is the mobility issue in terms of recruits to serve in the military in Ukraine needs to be improved and enhanced.
Actually, I think that it is a very complex problem, and
Yes.
there is no simple choice to resolve it. And from one point of, I think that our government needs to work more from information standpoint, because we became victims of our own. I can say, if I can say, not a propaganda, but our own media field, where most of our state news every time told that we will win in any cost, we will win for sure. So such kind of informational politics, it was played a bad joke with us, with most of the people, because it was making all this time the people, especially male population, to think that the victory will become without their active participation. Under active participation, I don't mean that anyone should be fighting, of course not, but without active participation, like with supporting army, donating to army, or establishing different kind of supporting projects, like for example, like Kevin project or mine project and other project of such kind. And actually, that was really playing a bad, in a bad way with mobilization and recruitment. And of course, also Russia spent incredible amount of financial and other sources to compromise our mobilization, and trying to launch different media campaigns, saying that trying to play with the fear of the people, that you don't need to go to serve because you will definitely lose your life and stuff like that. So that's because actually the vast majority of guys who are now fighting, there were the people who were already went at the very beginning. And now, of course, most people who left are not all of course, but the vast majority of people who didn't go, of course, they have now more doubts to go because of these things. So that's why I think that our government, of course, should be more attentive to this topic, actually without from one side completely blaming those who don't go, but try to figure out how to resolve it from other standpoint. This I definitely think is a problem here. And also we are quite I also think that there is, if I can say so, some lack of patriotism for some bigger part of population who also don't want to risk their life, and it is absolutely normal. So it is a very complex problem. I think we need to find a way how to resolve it.
Kevin, can you address the question and maybe something that we've just touched on, the mobilization issue, and your answer? How do you see the overview of the state of the war today in Ukraine?
So just on my general impressions, right now the war is largely static. The Russians kind of ran out of gas a long time ago. Unfortunately, at least temporarily, so did we. And now we're in a bit of a rebuilding phase, and it's kind of a race now to see who can rebuild the best and the fastest, and then find a way to outmaneuver and overmatch the other. It's very tense for us because this is Russia's war to lose. That was always the case. That's why a lot of people thought that it wouldn't last, wouldn't last a week. Now they certainly underestimated us, but that doesn't mean that we can rest on our laurels, and it doesn't mean that we can believe our own, I won't call it propaganda, but our own marketing. To come on to the question of mobilization, I know a lot of young men here. I know a lot of young men that aren't fighting, and I know one of the main reasons we talk about the concerns, and the concerns they have are, if I join the military, I'll be handed a rusty old AK, 47 maybe, like a very old rifle, and I will be sat in a trench that's full of water and provided no training and no equipment and be left to die. That's of course a very chaotic and I would say not a holistic view of the situation. Months ago, when we were negotiating one of the biggest steps that we've made recently to get us onto the base where you came to visit us, it was put to me by a colonel at the National Guard headquarters here that in the first year of the war, it was just shock, and they had to push as many people forward to fight as possible. And in that time, a lot of the people that were part of earlier capacity building, instructors, junior leaders, they immediately went to the fight, and they were taken out of the training system. And where we are now is we're out of that emergency situation. So we could put it in like first aid terms, where we stopped the serious bleeding, but now we have to do something about the wound itself to stop it from reopening. And where that comes in is largely training, making sure that you have responsible training cycles, that you're not just saying, okay, here's 5 days. No, you need more like, to be honest, you need more like 4 weeks, say 20 working days. That's a more realistic level for basic training. And then from that, you can go into the more specialized stuff. What we're seeing is a turn to that. And this colonel at the headquarters, he said, now's the time where we need to we've stabilized things, and we need to get back to proper training cycles. It's always, of course, it's going to be shorter than in peacetime, but that's something that the Ukrainian government can advertise and say, look, you're not going to be abandoned. You are going to receive, this standardized equipment. You are going to receive this standardized training. You'll see one of the newer National Guard brigades, they have recruiting posters. And on that poster, they say, you are guaranteed 60 days of training. And that is the way to reach out to these guys that are hesitant, because they're willing to fight. They're willing to do what they need to do for Ukraine. Where the question for them, where their confidence starts to shake is, are the leaders I'm put under actually are they going to care about my life? Do they, are they giving their full measure? And so I think by concentrating on the improvements that have been made to training, and the at least partial restoration of the peacetime training cycle, that is something where we can help, like our organization, of course, but where the Ukrainian government can really help reassure people that are shaky about recruiting, and even those who are thinking about fleeing the country or otherwise avoiding conscription, because it's quite a normal impulse in people, and if you especially in a democracy, if you want to convince them, you actually have to convince them. You have to give them a reason to to believe in the effort. And I think that is, of course, when we're talking on these scales of millions of people, every change is torturously slow. It drives me insane because I'm a very impatient person. But it is happening. The fact that I can talk to senior officers and see that this is what they are talking about, it's going to trickle down through the lower levels, and eventually it will hit the street level with regular people here. And that'll be the way that we can really, I believe, that we can restore confidence in the confidence of regular Ukrainians in the war effort, and bring it back to where it was in the early days. But it's going to take a lot of work, but that's what Dima and I are here for.
Kevin, when we were there at the base where you provide the training, we were watching the training, and I talked to a Legion person who was from Australia. And you know who I mean. I'm thinking his name escapes me right now. But he was telling us that, and this was, of course, to everybody on the call here, this was in the depths of not getting any aid for 5 months, that there wasn't enough ammunition really to train on, that you need 1,000 rounds, as I recall him talking to me, and they're only getting about 100 rounds to train on. And he talked about, it's like anything else, you develop a muscular memory and system. And the more you train, the more rounds you have, the better you're going to be prepared to deal with combat. You want to comment on that?
Absolutely. One of the problems that we've run into here is because Russia began planning what they're doing now at the dissolution of their empire back when the Soviet Union collapsed. And one of the things that they did is they gutted a lot of the industry that had been built up in Ukraine, and so especially ammunition factories. It's just this kind of thing that was realized when the invasion began, is we don't have enough ammunition factories here for things like rifles. Forget artillery ammunition. That's an entirely different kettle of fish, and again, we just don't have enough. In training, if you want to train somebody up to be a truly competent marksman in basic training, you're gonna need about 1,000 rounds to use. The good news is you can get someone to a decent enough level with lower amounts, but then that assumes that they're going to have the opportunity to practice later on, which they do. That's a note that I'll make, is we made our start training Ukrainian forces in the east, in artillery range of the Russians, which was necessary and an adventure. But the whole time I was out there, I was like, this is stupid. We need to get on a base. But no, that is an issue, and it's one of the, if we're talking about large scale solutions, getting ammunition manufacturing going here would be one of the biggest things. But then also having our partners in the West step up their manufacturing. We need to. This is something that's germane to the United States, because I know it's part of the discussion now, how a lot of the aid packages is actually money that goes into rebuilding the manufacturing base in the States, which is really great because it employs Americans. It's good, solid middle class jobs, and the United States has been the world's premier industrial superpower for we're going on 100 years now. The arsenal of democracy, we're getting that back, and I think I'm sorry I'm going very far off of the topic of the conversation, but I think it bears saying that this is something that is, I think, going to be beneficial for the United States and Ukraine, and it's something that's relatively easy for our Western partners to do, to start back up this ammunition manufacturing, and then just start the pipeline coming in. And especially because in a lot of cases we're now Ukraine is moving away from all the old Soviet stuff. Now they've got a bunch of it around, like rifles, and they're not going to, you don't throw away a tool. But we're seeing more, say, AR pattern rifles, and that's something that we're intimately familiar with as American, Canadian, in some cases even British veterans, although they use a different rifle. But this is stuff that we're familiar with, and you can flow that in there as part of the regular military industrial production in Western countries, and in that case, put the tools in our hands as trainers, and then especially in the hands of the fighters, to have a massive, it makes a massive difference. Teaching one Ukrainian soldier to shoot well, okay, that's great. That's very good for him individually. Teaching 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers to shoot well, and then teaching them how to pass that skill on, that has a measurable effect. And it starts from just I say small things, but relatively small things like increasing ammunition production.
I want to talk about ammunition and ammunition production with regard to drones, which is redefined warfare, and particularly in this war, and more than any other, I think. And so before I do that, though, I want to get a quick answer. I don't need a long answer from either of you, but if you could, in the United States during the 60s, we had a draft. You were 18, you have to sign up for the draft, and you could be drafted. In Ukraine, they just lowered it, your requirement to join, from 27 years of age to 25, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm wondering, what's the psychology behind that? I mean, manpower and women power, by the way, there are about 50,000 women who are in Ukrainian military forces as well. That's really a significant piece of this puzzle. Not only the aid from Europe and from Western Europe and from the United States, but having the manpower to be able to match that 600-mile line front that stretches across Ukraine. So, what is behind the idea of not going lower? Now, is it the younger soldiers are needed in terms of reproducing other human beings? I mean, that's a logical explanation for that, but it really runs against being able to match up with the Russians and their superior numbers of people. So I'll just throw that out there, and you want to comment on that, and then we can go over and we'll talk about drones a little bit, because I think a lot of people here are probably interested in that.
Do you want me to comment on that one first, or
on the draft thing, on the eligibility thing, if you, and
So-
then if you want to comment on it too, that's fine. I mean, I know you deal.
I'm staying out of drones. I do not know drones. I have experts for that. And anyway, no. So that hesitation, I think it's a very complex issue. I'm not a Ukrainian. I know Ukrainian society fairly well for an immigrant, but not to the degree that a native-born Ukrainian would. But what I see is one thing is there is a hesitation on the behalf of at least this Ukrainian administration to do things that are could be seen as heavy-handed or authoritarian. And there's a strong impulse against authoritarianism in Ukraine. I think people can tell. There's that worry, and it's been a worry for a long time because of the immigration out of Ukraine, of having these demographic disasters and really losing the population to a point where we can't continue as a nation. I don't know. I don't know precisely what's behind it. I haven't ever really asked. But I'm I kind of take I take a bit of a hard line on it, which is, it's part of the conversation today is demobilization of the soldiers that were initially mobilized. And, you know, like from the Canadian War experience, there were Canadians that spent from 1939 until 45 or 46 in Europe. And this is an existential war. What everyone, absolutely everyone, Ukrainian and otherwise, needs to realize is that Russia will not allow Ukraine to exist as a nation or a state. They have made that very clear. They've done a genocide here before, and they will do another if they're given the opportunity. They're trying to now with the areas that they've occupied. What everyone needs to realize, and that includes a lot of these, we'll say, hesitant young men here, is that like everything's on the line. And if it, you know, if it comes to it, you need to give your full measure. And if that means fighting until you've died, you know, what, it's unfortunate to have been born in these times, but the way I think about it is I'm happy that this is happening in my lifetime and not the lifetime of my children, because I'd rather just deal with it now and then they can grow up in peace. That's what I want. And you know, if it comes to it, I'd rather end up fighting myself than to, you know, to have them deal with it. But you know, it's a contentious issue, and I mean, there's a lot of people in Ukraine that would disagree with me saying that. You know, it's not so simple, and it really isn't that simple. I am simplifying it. I don't think oversimplifying it, but I'm just putting it. You know, in the military, we say that a 70% solution executed violently is much better than a 100% solution, and that 70% solution is just bite the bullet and fight. But it comes back to what I said earlier, that that will be the participation on behalf of the person being conscripted, but the commitment that must come from the state is proper equipment and proper training. You know,
Yeah.
it's and that really is not just that's morally required, but also it's completely pragmatic, because we will lose a war of attrition. So our guys, not to be perfectly blunt, it's not pleasant to say, but our guys need to be killing 10 times the number of Russians as we have killed in order to properly have the effect that we want. And that needs to be combined with maneuvering, like what we saw in the Kharkiv offensive and like what we saw in the Russian withdrawal from Kherson. We need to use maneuver as the smaller combatant. We must use maneuver to force the Russians out, because this isn't a boxing match. We're not going to win a boxing match, but we may win a jiu-jitsu or a Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that we need. And that means training.
Yeah, I agree. But that's a good transition to drones, I think, because that's part of the maneuvering that you're probably talking about. And so let me just ask, Dima, you're a drone expert. You have a drone and high-tech company. You have a facility that makes them. Some of our folks were there and saw what you do. What basically then is, are people adapting to drones on the battlefield readily, easily? And what do you see in the future with regards to drones in this war? Are the Ukrainians ahead of the Russians, or is it kind of like a stalemate right now because the Russians are getting their drones from a variety of different places? China, of course, being the biggest supplier of elements for the drones, but also, you know, the Iranians and others are participating as well. Talk about drones for a bit to us before we
open. Thank you so much. Yeah, first of all, I agree with Kevin about the origin of our war with the Russians, that we really cannot win them in direct force-to-force fight, and maneuvers are incredibly important thing. Also, as much as better education in all aspects in a gun fight, what Kevin does, like as well as all the other war aspects, it is incredibly crucial, important. Also, I will give you more context about the drones. Actually, in a drone warfare against Russia, it is also very hard stuff, because unfortunately the drones itself doesn't give us direct benefits before the Russians. It was actually at the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, because at those time Russians were moving like very straightforward. They didn't have flexibility because they just did, you know, like very vertical orders, and at those time we had incredible advantage, as Kevin already mentioned, like this maneuverability, which the way it was helping us to kick them out from Kharkiv area, and also get them out from Kiev area, and it was actually incredible. But then they learn a lot by losing a ton of their people and ton of their technique, and they also, you know, become quickly adapting all the great ideas and great stuff, which was very effective against them. And that's why even when at the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, they were only using Orlans. Orlan is like small airplane. It's like fixed wing UAV, like small airplane with a propeller in front, like a very simple reconnaissance drone for high altitudes. But then they started quickly adapt with drone technology. First of all, they started to procure Mavics in a huge amount, and actually, as far as you heard, Mavics are incredibly important, even it is unfortunately Chinese technology and have all the side effects of Chinese technology. And like in the long run, of course, China is like enemy of our tomorrow day, and it is like this passive enemy, but it is enemy anyway, which could change its behavior anytime in near future and become active enemy. But unfortunately, it is like less evil to use Mavics, and Mavics are incredibly important. They give you a lot for sure, you know, like for short combat range, like for tactical reconnaissance for 10 kilometers range. And actually, Russians started to procure Mavics in incredible amounts, and actually started to overscale even us with Mavics, because unfortunately in vast majority all the drone warfare here in Ukraine is supported by volunteers with a huge volunteering funds. That's why donations are incredibly crucially important. And Russia was able to place the drone warfare on their governmental level, and their government started to buy tons of Mavic from China. And of course, not direct way, because China also tried to show that they do not support Russia. But anyway, Russians buy tons of Mavics through the Dubai, through the Kazakhstan, you know, like using like 10 subsidiary companies, you know how they do that, so that they have a lot of middle companies between them and DJI, for example, in China. But anyway, and then as far as we started to effectively use FPVs, actually FPV was our own Ukrainian idea. We were the first who started to use FPV drones. Like very short remark to those who never heard this word, actually. FPV, it is already not a reconnaissance, but it is a striking drone. It is great advantage that it is very cheap, very simple hobby FPV, like first-person view drones, which are actually operated with special goggles, and they don't have any advanced stabilization technology. And it is a great advantage because they are very fast. You can do any kind of maneuver with them. It's like piloting a helicopter, where you can do all this kind of incredible high-level pilot stuff. And they are become a really incredible weapon for specific tasks, which are no other weapon can actually handle. It's they become incredibly important for cutting the logistics on a tactical level for up to 20 kilometers range, because they are incredible in destroying all the military vehicles which are driving ammunition, which are driving supply, gasoline to the different units. So FPV drones can incredibly effective handle with destroying the enemy logistics in this short, small level, but which is incredibly important. even their great ability to destroy tanks, it's not the main advantage, because actually to destroy a tank with FPV, it's also not so simple, and it requires extra piloting skills. And also in the most cases, you will not blow up the tank from the one FPV. You will need to spend at least 2 FPVs, one to take away active armor, and the next one to already make a hole in those hole in active armor which you made before. But anyway, as far as we started to actively use FPVs, Russians very quickly adapted, and also on governmental level they started to buy incredible amount of Chinese components, and we now become in such sort of a trap where from one side we have a willing and we have opportunity to go away from Chinese technology, like to make all these basic components by our own, of course using European countries, because as you know, we don't have our own manufacturing of the semiconductors, but anyway we can use Netherlands, Switzerland semiconductors, and then to build up the bigger components here in Ukraine and solder everything. But it will require some extra R&D time, and there are already some guys who succeeded in it, but they still need the time and R&D efforts to make this production on a huge scale, which actually China already have. And of course, price, it's not so sweet as Chinese prices are, and costs also incredibly important here, as far as these directions are not well supported by the government and heavily rely on donations from average regular people, because we have a bunch of huge volunteering funds who just collect the money from their subscribers. They, for example, have some YouTube channels where they told that, hey guys, now we really need your efforts to donate at least a few dollars each one of you. So I have like 500,000 subscribers. So if at least each one of you will donate $1, I'll be able to buy like a fleet of FPV drones and send them to very good brigades who already have a good experience with that. And also, as soon as we invent some extra interesting piece of technology, for example, automatical target acquisition system, which actually allows FPV drones to bypass Russian jamming station, Russia quickly sees that we have success in this direction, and they quickly mimic it and scale. It's even better than we do, because we have access to the same component base, which is China, and Russia have here much more bigger dedication from their government. And actually, drone warfare, it's not that simple, and it doesn't give us any advantage by default. We are still overcoming Russian in the most cases, but it's just because of incredible dedication of volunteers, incredible dedication of some regular people who still keep donating, and incredible dedication of engineers who try to invent any possible solution and try to use it as fast as possible before Russian will mimic it, and already start to think about countermeasures, what we will do if Russia will mimic this technology. So that's why it's some sort of light speed chess where you don't have time to rest, you don't have time to recap, you need to move as fast as possible, even within this warfare. And of course, we are getting some very high advanced pieces of technology from Western countries in terms of drones, but they are very limited. They are not very spread. And Mavics and FPVs are two main tools which are used everywhere by every brigade, by every combat unit, and they are very essential. And our government already started to supply some FPV drones and even Mavics. So our Ministry of Defense finally officially established the contracts to Mavic supplies. But anyway,
well, that's really a good,
like
good rundown. We appreciate that. And one of the things that I know that Brian mentioned on the chat is the cost. There's a big cost differential a drone in the United States compared to a drone made in Ukraine, it's a significant difference. And but I'll leave that at that, and I'll turn it back to Brian so you can ask others to participate. We got about a half hour left. Open it up
Yeah,
for questions and comments.
Let me ask one question, and then I'm going to ask everybody who wants to ask a question to shoot me a little chat and let me just put your name in the hopper. Just strategically, I think both for Kevin and Dima, I know drones can only do so much. You need artillery. What are the strategic risks and opportunities you see in the next 6 months for the Ukrainians to, one, the challenges you see they have to overcome in the next 6 months, and then some opportunities they might be able to achieve in the next 6 months. So big picture question, thinking like a general. I'm promoting you both to general here. Kevin, you want to answer that first?
Thanks for the promotion. That was I got commissioned and made a general all in the same day. So strategically, that's actually something that I've been thinking about as I've been listening to this. It's one of the things, and it relates to training. You can see I got training on the mind. We need to take advantage of the vast cultural differences between us and the Russians, and where that comes in is you cannot have proper maneuver warfare anyway, without something called mission command, and it's one of the things that we really focus on and thankfully specialize in, because the militaries that we draw from, primarily Canadian, American, and British militaries, are excellent at mission command. And what that is it's essentially reducing decision-making power down to the lowest level, so that every leader who is actually dealing with a given situation is empowered to make decisions based on the reality on the ground, not some hyper intricate plan that a general has come up with. And Ukrainians absolutely excel at mission command. When we give that as a tool set, it's things like mission planning, how to deliver orders, how to estimate. It's something called a combat estimate. You basically look at the situation on the ground and you think, okay, how is this likely to unfold? What do we know the enemy has? What are they likely to have? And then that helps you make decisions in your planning. Anyhow, we give these tools to Ukrainians, and they're naturally creative thinkers, and they apply solutions that even we didn't see coming as instructors. And that having that tool set so perfectly made for the way that Ukrainians are naturally act and naturally operate. That's the big thing that we need to push out here, and it's something that is it's so important for Sabre, because we are ideally placed to do that. We are dealing with NCOs, junior officers. We're dealing with these lowest level tactical leaders who will have the most flexibility in the situations that they run into. Like they'll really be the ones making these calls. And if we can get training scaled up, not taken off, but because we've taken care of that part of it, but if we can get training scaled up inside Ukraine, especially to the point where we are teaching instructors, and we're given the appropriate amount of time with these soldiers, get them up to a level where we can test them and then trust them to pass on what we've taught them, then that's where we start to really move the needle. And so I'd say that's what our next 6 months, it's basically what I'm going to be obsessed with, is scaling our efforts. And there's one thing that I'll mention, not to brag, but just so that people understand the level of seriousness that this has taken on, is I was contacted by an officer at NATO's Security Assistance Group. The headquarters are in Wiesbaden, in Germany, and they're overseeing the entire training effort on the NATO side, and they are starting to look seriously at how they can support and enable training in the country. And that's a huge morale boost for us, because if you'd asked me if that was even possible 6 months ago, I'd say, no, you're insane. That never will happen. But it shows that we're evolving. We're moving the ball down the field here in Ukraine, and so are our Western partners, and it's incredibly encouraging. This is how, we are going. I believe in my heart, I wouldn't be here. Truthfully, I wouldn't be here if I thought we were going to lose, because I love my wife and I don't want her to deal with that. What happens after we lose, because it would turn into an insurgent. Look, Russia will never actually win here. And it's one thing I just want to make clear to everyone who's listening. The best Russia can hope for is what the United States just went through in Afghanistan. 20 years of low level or medium level violence, and then an ignominious withdrawal. But I would rather not have that, because I would I want to have a family and I want them to have a safe place. But anyway, I believe. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh no. Oh no, keep going. I just want to make sure I get.
I'll finish. Yeah. I'll come to the bloody point. I believe in Ukrainian victory, and I believe that Ukrainian victory is going to be achieved by turning Ukraine's military not only into the most experienced in Europe, but the most competent in Europe. And I believe that that's going to happen for good reason, because I'm seeing the progress here on the ground, and we're hearing that officers in their position are talking to little old me is a very encouraging sign, because it shows that ball is being pushed forward. And with a little more support, I think it's really going to explode here, the work that we're doing. And so yeah.
That's exciting. And Dima, what do you see as the challenges and opportunities?
Actually, the biggest challenge of the nearest future, I see that's a huge lack of people on the front line. And of course, I am civilian and I don't have any right to convince anyone, because I still, from one's point of view, I still think that it should be a life decision of each Ukrainian, whether he wish, if it is male population, whether this person wish to go to the front line, because you really risk your life. You really can, burn all the bridges with your previous life if something will happen, as even some serious injury and stuff like that. It's absolutely I think important for each person to decide. But I think that if you're not serving at the moment, you need to do all possible things to support the army, so that your personal not availability on the front line will convert to incredible help to the guys who are actually there. And I think that incredible challenge would be to overcome this tiredness, which is now have many our population, because you are every time live in such a kind of situation. And it is absolutely strange to hear, especially to the military guys, when they hear the civilians are getting tired. But unfortunately, psychology works this way, that even if you are not fighting yourself, and you're not dedicated anyhow to the process, you really can get tired. And I really think that first huge challenge will be the mental challenge, so that Ukrainian people need to be aware and never to lose this thought that actually it is existential war. And the next challenge would be, of course, from the governmental level, to dive deeper on the current technological problems related to the drones, and do all possible ways to cut the connection between us and Russians, which I already mentioned, that as far as we have any good solution, Russians quickly mimic it, because of the same component base. And it is also related to the jamming stations as well, because we also do the jammers the same fashion as the Russians do. We are buying Chinese radio distortion generation models, and then build all these jammers. Russia does the same, so we also need to have some other way to fight against them. So I think that these are the both biggest challenges. And also, of course, to use as much maximum creativity as we can for next possible ideas with drone usage. And also, the big challenge would be to, if you're again talking about the drones, our government recently allowed to create the separate type of military units, which are like UAV units, so that drone operators are no longer members of any other units like infantry brigades or tank brigades. So they were limited with the tasks of these brigades, you know, like to support assaults with FPV drones or stuff like that. But now, as far as they are separate unit, they can use the drones on much more strategic ways. For example, with FPV, I explained that first of all, it is a great tool to destroy this tactical logistics level, and it is the best tool in this area, so that it will give more opportunity to use drones even more effectively. So hopefully that our government will also do here the best. And of course, we as Ukrainian people be aware that we will survive if we will fight, and if we will don't fight. I don't mean under fight. I don't mean that it is absolutely necessary to be in the trench, but neither you're helping or you're in trench. If you're not do both of these sides, we will definitely lose. So Ukrainian people should be aware in it. And yeah.
Okay, well, that's really great. Now, I think maybe if you can, Brian, take questions from
Yeah.
folks, and if we can keep our questions and comments relatively short and our answers relatively short, it'll give everybody a chance to get in there before the end.
Vince Meldrum, I know you got to jump off, but ask your question, and then we'll send you the tape interview here. And then Peter has a question, and then we'll do wrap-up remarks. We'll end in about 15 minutes, if that sounds good.
Excellent, and I'll hang on. So here's my question. Well, first of all, thank you. We in the United States, we hear a lot about systems and artillery and that type of thing, and we don't hear a lot about the war fighting problems in terms of people, and so I appreciate that. But my question is, we've talked about drones and artillery and that. Is there a system, a technology? Is there something that would be transformative on the battlefield? That we should be supportive of, that is not happening now?
Actually, unfortunately, there is no silver bullet, and as you see, some technology stuff, it could be some advantage for short term, but then enemy adapts to it. For example, right now, Russians have a great advantage. It is about gliding bombs, which they drop for 60 kilometers. It's just old Soviet Union bombs, but they were mastered with welded wings and GPS model to guide them gliding. And we don't have any countermeasures, so that's why we're waiting for F-16 from Western, so that we will have chance to destroy these airplanes before they will drop a gliding bombs. And these gliding bombs make us to move away, and so that Russians occupy territory again. So that is like a huge problem. So there is no silver bullet, and we just need to adapt and to invent and figure out new countermeasures and weapon.
Kevin, do you want to add to that?
It's really just sort of piggybacking on what Dima said, but yeah, giving us the capability to I don't want to jump into jargon, but giving us the capability to outrange the Russians as far as precision or semi-precision or long-range weapons goes. That's proven to be a huge. It's not like he said. There's no silver bullet, but it does make a big difference. The arrival, for example, of HIMARS and M270 launchers, the long-range guided rockets, that let us push back Russian supply concentrations, from the front lines, and so it adds to their logistical burden. Really, what all the differences that are made out here are small things. Even the training, we could bring. By some miracle, we could bring the Ukrainian forces up to, like the experience with maneuver warfare like we have in the West, and it would still mean, much more fighting. But it's those every little. It's like everything else, how do you eat an entire bowl? One piece at a time. So we just keep stacking up those little pieces, and that's how we'll win.
Quick question here from Peter Fenn, who asked me to read it for him. Curious about the impression of the latest Russian plans and the threat to use tactical nuclear weapons. How real is that threat, do you think, and how does it affect the morale? How will it be perceived?
Actually, from Ukrainian standpoint, as a Ukrainian guy, we don't afraid this possible usage of nuclear weapons at all, because if they would wish to use these nuclear weapons against us, they would already use it a long time ago, and but they will keep scaling the like all the information campaigns to make you believe that they will really use it. And it even looks funny today. I just saw a short news article from Belarus, which is satellite of Russia, and they were showing how Russia gives Belarus plans with tactical nuclear weapons, and that was a very funny picture when you see this Soviet Union bomber, this jet bomber with two tactical bombs, and they were trying to blur it, but then they show the picture from the other angle, and there are just a few tanks, but they blur it from other angle to show that it is some sort of tactical nuclear. So they will just play with media and making you believe that they will definitely use, so that you will stop to help us. So I think there will no any tactical usage, because even China, who is also a Russian satellite, is definitely against it. Yeah.
I bet Kevin's going to say the same thing. Kevin, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, like this is, I remember the first month of the war, first 2 months when it was apparent that it wasn't going to be the steamroll that the Russians were expecting. I remember I was going to bed one night and I thought, oh boy, are now they see that they're headed towards at least not the victory they wanted. Like, are they going to just throw over the game board and nuke us? And I just went to sleep because I was like, well, I guess I'll die then. And they haven't. So I don't think that they will, because that will we have no way of knowing if they've actually maintained those nukes. Because if they've maintained those nukes the way they've maintained the rest of their military, they might not even know what'll happen if they use it. Will it explode in the silo and irradiate the landscape? Will it just drop into the soil here in Ukraine and then we have an intact nuke? It's there's way more for them to lose by using nukes because that's before we address the response. Because once you open that door, there's we have, how many nuclear armed countries are there? Quite a few. And in Europe, there's at least Britain and France that I'm aware of. I'm not sure of any other nuclear armed European countries. And that sort of thing, when alliances and whatnot, advice and all this stuff kind of goes out the door once you bring that scale of threat in. And that's when these nuclear armed European powers are going to think maybe it's worth doing a annihilatory strike on them because they've gone off the map. But no, I don't think they're going to use them. I don't worry about it.
Thanks. We only have about 7 minutes left. And David, I saw your hand up, but I wanted to make sure we have time for Dima and Kevin just to sort of talk.
I want to see if anybody else had any questions or comments.
Yeah, I just want to give these two a chance to sort of give us a soft pitch on their investment needs. If we have, if we have rich friends who are able to write checks, or if we have some of that capacity, these two are both making a difference in this war in really strategic, tactical ways, and also need investments to support their general operating funds. And it's not the typical type of philanthropy, because it's we usually like to give to just the charitable pieces. This is actually helping to tactically help Ukrainians, protect their country. Tom, I see your hand raised. I do want to leave at least 2 minutes for each of these guys to pitch. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, my question is a brief one, and it's been touched on already. My church here in Georgetown in Washington, D.C. has twice in the last 6 or 8 months sent individuals to Ukraine to meet with military around the issues of their mental health and morale. And I wonder if either Kevin or Dima could just talk about that level of mental health and wellness.
Yeah, I can quickly tell from my own point of view. Unfortunately, there is also a big issue, and it will be incredibly important. It is already incredibly important, but it will be especially seen after active phase of war, after our victory. I also believe that we'll win anyway, but after the active phase of war will end, and a lot of these guys will go back home, there will be a lot of issues, and society need to be prepared to hospitalize these people, to help them to get rid of the current problems, because even as a Kevin, on everyday basis, I communicate with many soldiers, and there are a bunch of guys whom I try to help as much as I can with some extra clothes and some extra demands. And even to those guys to whom I help, and to those guys who know what I'm doing, anyway, even from some of them, I already feel this frustration when they even talk to me, when they don't tell me directly, but I feel that they feel even angry on me that I'm not in a range with them. And unfortunately, it is a big problem that we will definitely have when they get back home.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And I'll very briefly, my wife is a psychotherapist, and she's heavily involved in this. And what I can say is that the need is being anticipated, and there's an enormous gearing up of mental health professionals. And preemptively, this has surprised me in a very pleasant way. Preemptively, the government is making room for things like psychedelic assisted therapy, medical marijuana, ketamine therapy is already legal here. So there are and there were efforts previously existing from the earlier phase of the war from 2014. So there's going to be a huge need, but it's being anticipated, and God willing, we'll have that need met.
That's I think that answer is really a great answer. And when we were on our trip, we spent a lot of time talking to psychologists and programs to deal with those who are suffering mental health stress, not only in the military, but in the civilian population as well. And there's just a big ramping up. You can just feel it and see it when you're there. And the psychologists we came across in all of our meetings were very impressive people in terms of their quality of skills. And so I'm confident that the World Health Organization has been really on this. They don't send anybody there without any psychological basic skills anymore. That's as I understand it. Anybody going to Ukraine out of WHO has got to have that. I've heard that upwards of 30% of the population has a mental health problem, which could be anxiety, depression, PTSD, or something even worse like schizophrenia. It's a serious problem. They all know it, and they know they've got to try to lick it.
David, Dr. Eric, before he left, suggested we do a Zoom conversation with some of the folks we met around just exclusively on mental health issues. So look out for an email from us if you all want to come back and have a deeper dive on really just exclusively mental health issues. Let David or I know, and we'll be sure to put something together. I want to end on time here, but I want to give you guys 2 minutes, a 2-minute quick pitch. If we can write a check with a couple zeros on it, what could you guys most use help for? Who wants to go first on that? Kevin, I'll call on you, and then Dima, you close us out.
I'll try and be brief, which I think we're going to see as a bit of a challenge for me. Our costs are food, fuel, and accommodations. Our team are all volunteers. The instructors in Sabre, I really am humbled entirely by the fact that I've got people who've worked this long, this hard, and in some dangerous positions for free. I can tell you this: we were running quite comfortably on about $2,000 in well, not comfortably, but we were running on about $2,000 in donations a month. I looked, our maximum right now at the scale we're on, our maximum operating requirement would be about $7,000 a month. If I were to pay the team that's present in the country right now a small stipend of about, say, $2,000 a month, that would only cost us an addition, well, only cost us an additional $20,000 a month on top, and that would, at that point, everything would be super smooth. The guys wouldn't have to worry about bills back home. They wouldn't have to worry about recreational activities here because we do need to take that time, so as not to burn out. But I know for a fact that we can get everything done and not have to worry if we're taking in that $7,000 a month. We're already at about $1,500 a month just in small donations. So if there's anyone that's able to give, it really makes an enormous difference, even $200 here and there. So it's
And I'll
we're
connect
fortunate.
you guys.
Perfect. The last thing I want to leave is that the thing that we are very fortunate about on our team is all of our problems can be solved by money, which is a lot more than a lot of others can say.
Thanks. So yeah, feel free to reach out to Kevin directly or myself or David, and we'll connect you to. And maybe you have a wealthy cousin too who might be interested in this. I'm sure we can set up a meeting as well. Dima, how about?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. I'll also be brief as much as I can. So actually, I will add to the Kevin words that in our case also actually money solve the vast majority of the issues. Actually, our school by its existence cost around $15,000 per each month because we have a huge team of instructors who have a full-time job here. Also, we have a huge facility which we rent, and also we have a lot of spending materials like FPV drones for education, and also extra equipment which is gets out of order time to time. And there are like many expenses, and actually money not only help us to maintain the current school activity, but also help us to add more and more valuable things to our education process, to buy some extra equipment and to add some extra courses. For example, we had on mind to add some fixed wing UAV courses, and we have ability to and know how to do that, but actually money is the limiting factor. So I would add to those to the words of Kevin that even some a few $1,000 would per month would be very helpful, because we are trying to engage funding from absolutely different sources. I also dedicate some sources from my own business. That's why I would very appreciate for any help. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dima and Kevin. Yeah, you both worthy causes. And of course, David and I wouldn't have invited you on if we didn't believe in your work, because we saw it up close and how high quality it is. David, you want to take us out? Any closing thoughts?
Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining, and I want to thank particularly Kevin and Dima for their contribution. You know, my sense when I was in Ukraine, by the way, Father Peter Daly is on as well. I know he had other appointments, but he came and joined us late. And as I told you earlier in our talk here, Peter and I traveled throughout Ukraine and Poland last year on the refugee issue and on a caregiver issue. He's a great person and wonderful to have be part of our team here. But I just want to say that, yeah, any help you can give them, of course, is going to be fantastic, not only for them, but for all the Ukrainians. I mean, this is not a duct tape war, but, you know, compared to what the Russians have, it's you know, we're working on every angle in order to get the leverage we need to be competitive. And it works. I mean, if you look at the naval situation in Ukraine, they don't really have a navy. They have a naval academy, but, you know, they don't have really ships, and they've been able, through drones and other innovative ideas, to really take back the Black Sea, where they can ship grain out. And it's truly amazing what they've been able to do and how they've been able to deal with the Russians, because they're very innovative, they're smart, and they've been resilient, and I think they're going to be successful in all of this. But it takes different pieces, and we're a little piece, but we can do some things for them, and we're trying to do it on different fronts. And if you want to join, we'd be delighted to have you, because what they're doing is, I think, the most important thing that is happening internationally in the world today. This war in Ukraine is significant in so many ways, and we can't let it just drift off. We've got to stay supportive for those who are out there fighting it, and for their government, because the government has been democratic and will continue to be. So I thank all of you for being here, and I appreciate your efforts. And we look forward to staying in touch with you with emails, articles that we have written. Peter has just written a wonderful piece that we're going to get out. I've done another piece on Bucha, where there was a massacre. I'm doing one right now. In fact, I finished one right now that I submitted on Save Ukraine. It's the place in Kyiv and 14 other places in Ukraine where people come together, psychologists and others, to deal with the question of stolen children. 20,000 of them, 20,000 children in Ukraine have been stolen and by Russia. So, you know, we're doing what we can, and your help is really appreciated, and we thank you for joining us.
And Dima and Kevin, just shoot me the easiest way to donate, and I'll send that to this group via email when we're done here. So, but thanks you all. This was really enlightening.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good
Thanks.
night to Dima and Kevin. I know it's a little later for you.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
everyone.
Thanks,
Good night,
Brian.
everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.